Do you keep losing to counters while using Splashyard? Well, in this video, I'll be showing you how to beat 4 hard counters with Splashyard. First is against Miner Poison. First, my opponent went for a Miner to tank for their wall breakers, but they messed up, so he countered it, and I used the opportunity to activate my King Tower. About 20 seconds later, they went for it again, and this time they logged my Tombstone and ended up getting a wall breaker connection. I went for Graveyard with my Barb Barrel right away because I knew my opponent couldn't attack me, and here's where I knew I had to lock in. My opponent goes for another Miner wall breakers, but I Tombstone right on top of the wall breakers to kill them. A little bit later, I found some opportunities to go for poison onto my opponent's other tower. And then a little while after that, it hit double elixir. So I decided to go for a big push with all of my units, but my opponent ends up defending. And I made a mistake here of just going for a graveyard when I shouldn't have. I try again to build another push, but unfortunately my opponent ends up defending again. Eventually it hits triple elixir, so I decide to spam more stuff at the bridge. But since my opponent kept spamming miners at my tower, the game was still pretty close. But since I was using my graveyard to tank for my troops every time, my opponent couldn't keep up with all my spam and I ended up winning the game. Next, here's how to beat Royal Giant with Mother Witch and Lightning. My opponent immediately goes for a Royal Giant, so I defend with my Tombstone, and even so, it still ends up getting a hit. So here I go for a Graveyard because I have some counter push, but of course my opponent has Mother Witch. A little while after, I cycle my Barb Barrel and it does get a hit, but my opponent is building a push with their Royal Giant. Here I start to set up my defenses. Here I did a bad tornado. I meant to only get the monk, but it ended up getting the Royal Giant as well, but thankfully the fisherman took my knight and it kited the monk backwards. So the first push was defended successfully. And then a while later, my opponent does this weird monk push and tries to get some damage with the ability. With the knight, I try to make a push using my graveyard to tank, but it doesn't really end up working. Next, my opponent goes for another Royal Giant push, but since they cycled their monk in the back, it can't really do much and the push is pretty weak. So here I just go for a graveyard with my Barb Barrel, but because my opponent only has a Royal Giant down, that Royal Giant is going to be pretty easy to defend, and I end up getting some pretty good damage. And here I went for a blank graveyard because my opponent spent all their elixir and they're not going to be able to place their Mother Witch down in time, and I really needed to get damage or I would just lose the game. And since it's triple elixir, I'm able to cycle cards really fast and defend the next Royal Giant really easily. I also get this clutch Tombstone down, which really saves me. And because of the blank graveyard I went earlier when my opponent had no elixir, I was able to get a lot of damage and I eventually just end up winning the game. Next is against Lava Hound. My opponent went Lava Hound in the back, so I went for Tombstone, a knight, and the baby dragon. Here my opponent goes for a balloon, so I have to Ice Wizard and Barb Barrel, but my opponent poisons my Ice Wizard and it kills it. Also important to tornado the first balloon to your king tower so that you can activate it in order to kill the other balloons later on way easier. My opponent goes for Lava Hound in the back again, so I go for a Barbarell with my Graveyard in order to get some damage, but my opponent has Barbarian, so they counter it pretty well. And here I go for a really nice baby dragon to kill both of the skeleton dragons, and my opponent poisons my baby dragon, but my baby dragon's able to kill the skeleton dragons before the baby dragon dies. Here I kind of messed up, but it's okay. A little bit later I go for another Graveyard, and this time, since my opponent's low on elixir, I get a lot of damage. And right here I knew my opponent's poison was out of cycle, so I went for Graveyard and I ended up winning the game. Next is against Giant Skeleton Pig's Mirror. This one's kind of a bonus because this deck isn't really that good anymore, but in case your friends use this against you, here's how to beat it. First, my opponent goes for a Royal Ghost at the bridge, but I just counter it with the Knight. Then my opponent goes Giant Skeleton, so I Barbarell other lane and I do get some damage. Here my opponent goes for a Mother Witch on offense, but it's pretty easy to defend for me. Since my opponent used Mother Witch, I go for a Graveyard with my Barbarell because the only thing they have for this is arrows. Also here, King Tower activation, always make sure you get one if you can. When I hit double elixir, my opponent went for kind of a big push, so I had to defend here. Here I went for a Graveyard, hoping to get some damage, but my opponent defends it with the Mother Witch, and they go for their own Royal Hogs at the bridge to attack me right away. A little bit later, my opponent went for another offensive Mother Witch, so I used that opportunity to go for a Graveyard with my Barbarell, and I ended up getting a lot of damage. Here my opponent used their Mother Witch to defend my baby dragon, and I thought I won, but they had mirror, so they just mirrored their Mother Witch. Okay, this push was a little bit tricky to defend, and I was kind of intimidated, but my Barbarell saved me, and because my deck has a lot of splash, I was able to make it out alive. And here I eventually just won because the tower was in poison range and they couldn't really do anything. Okay, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you didn't, tell me what I can improve on, and I'll see you next time.